Welcome to Heartland Darkland. I'm Cassie.
And I'm Shannon.
Hey,
Hey,
Dark
Dark Heart.
Hearts. Hey.
Hey.
Man, it's February. This
Yes.
episode, I just realized if I had planned it better, this episode is going to be like our before Valentine's Day episode.
It sure is, isn't it? I'm
Yeah.
thrown off on when these even are coming out anymore.
Same. I don't even know what day it is anymore. Everything is a hot mess. Who knows?
I know.
It's fine.
It is fine.
I feel like there was something I had wanted to talk about. I was like, ooh, and now I don't remember. So clearly it was
That's
super
where we're at.
important.
Yeah, always. So
I will say top of the hour, we went and saw Companion, which
yes,
was by the Omaha director.
yes, which I actually loved it.
I loved it.
I
Now,
did too.
if you haven't watched a trailer, don't, because I feel like it would have been better if we hadn't known that one little bit first.
Right. Given it's the whole plot, but it would have been fun just to find out in those first, you don't even find out for the first, 20 minutes-ish, maybe?
20, 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, it was good.
It was good. And I wouldn't call it horror. To me, it was more thriller-esque.
Yes. Totally.
Some action-esque.
Some comedy.
There was comedy. Yes.
It was a good time. It's probably one of the better ones I've enjoyed lately, to be honest.
Yes.
I would totally see that again. It was just a fun little, it was fun.
But that did, so real quick, for those who like horror movies, I almost texted you. So there's just a 15-minute, it's an independent film on YouTube called The Other Side of the Box.
Okay.
Made me so uncomfortable.
Okay, so I need to watch this.
Yes, please do, because I need someone else to it's not even jump scare scary. It's not gore scary.
Okay.
It's just unsettling. It is so unsettling, and
that's the kind of scary stuff I like.
Same. And then you need to watch, this one is an hour long.
Okay.
Milk and Cereal, but it's serial serial killer.
And what's that? Is that on YouTube as well?
That's also on YouTube. Independent film. I guess they only had an $800 budget, and the acting and stuff. Oh my god, that one is just, oh my god. Okay. Also unsettling. Again, not super. There's a few I don't even want to call it gory moments that.
Yeah.
It has some other stuff, but yeah. Oh, so if you guys know, if you've got some recs for some good creepy horror, I don't like the gore.
Yeah.
But oh my god, yeah. Nope. My friend was like, I need you to watch this 15-minute YouTube video. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, I'm so unsettled right now.
Yeah.
I
don't like this.
So uncomfortable.
Okay. I'm for sure going to have to watch that and let you know.
Yes.
I'll probably text you later because I'm sure I will forget what it's called. So
yeah, that's
remember it's in the moment, but
it's fine. So yeah, that's just my little thing, I guess,
I love
for you guys.
Creepy, scary-ish movie.
Yeah.
So I've been reading a lot of very unsettling books lately that I'm I feel like maybe I need to take a break on some of those books because it totally does affect your mental health sometimes. Just when we talk about doing these cases, I'm those are so dark that I'm the person that wrote this, I think what goes on in their brain to write something like this, And then I'm wow, I really loved it, but I'm also really disturbed that I liked it, one of those things. But
I mean, listen, I read dark romances, and I was texting with my friend about the book Lights Out, which I absolutely adore. I love it. And it's our main dude does a little bit of stalking, and Facebook ad popped up for another one that talked about stalking. I was texting my friend who likes the same books, and I was like, who doesn't love a good stalker? And she was like,
true.
People who aren't mentally unstable, Cassie. I was like,
fair.
Listen.
In a book setting, when we know it's not real thing.
Yes.
That's when we love it.
Yes. Listen, Josh from Lights Out is such a golden retriever boyfriend, and he's just a little protective and wants to know where she is.
So he's Joe from You, the TV show You.
Because Joe was crazy.
Yeah.
Joe...
I mean, anyone that's stalking someone is probably crazy.
Okay, yes. But...
Because he also had the same vibes of, I just want to protect you, and...
Okay, but he was also kind of a sociopath.
I mean, he's a lot of things. Yeah, he's a murderer as well.
Yeah.
So I know about this other character here.
Josh is not a murderer, not on purpose. There's an accidental murder.
I was like, how is that?
So...
Okay, that's fair.
His dad was a serial killer, and he's very afraid that he is like him, but he's not.
Okay.
It's a
Well,
delight. I'm not gonna lie, it's a delightful book. There's great banter and comedy. It's pretty funny too. So yeah,
okay. Well, that
highly
sounds great.
recommend.
There's our intro to all the people who want some weird
Yeah,
book recs or show.
creepy movies.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're into the weird stuff like we are, then that's where you're gonna
Yeah.
want to go.
Listen, you want some book recs, you hit me up. Unless
Yeah.
it's like nonfiction or biography. That would be Shannon's area.
Some of them like biography. I like a good memoir, but I like a lot of dark books.
Yeah.
And I just read the really disturbing one, and it's been like, I just can't shake. You know, when you read a book and it's
Mm,
like so dark that I'm like, it's a John Mars or Mayers. I don't know how he says his
okay.
last name, but dang,
I haven't
I'll
read
just
it.
say that. It's called, I don't even know which, he has so many. I don't know. I can't think of keep it in the family, maybe? Is that one of it? I don't know. If people know what I'm talking about, then you know. And wow.
There's a horror book that I read that was horror more so because it was again unsettling and like
Mm.
could happen. And it's called Pen Pal, not to be confused with the dark romance Pen Pal. This one is by Dathan Auerbach.
Mm.
And like I know it's got some mixed reviews, but that was one like especially as a parent, like that one, I read it like 2 years ago. And it's one that still I think about sometimes. And I'm just like, oh,
Mm. Yeah, that's kind of how my dog is also wants to give her opinion on this. This book also had to do with some child stuff that I was
mm,
like, okay, goodness. So, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself while the dog barks
okay,
her
I'll
ass
start.
off
Yep,
and go right ahead.
I'll jump right in.
Thanks.
So, for this week's episode, before I get into things, I do want to mention some trigger warnings for this episode. There is talk of rape, rape of a child, abuse, abuse of a child. I'm not going into any graphic details, but I still wanted to make sure that if even the mention of these things is triggering for you, like this is a pretty heavy case. So you might want to skip it if any of that is
Well, it
going
sounds
to
like
be
it
hard.
goes hand in hand with what we were just discussing with some of our
Kind of
books,
actually,
except
yes.
for it's real life. So it's
It's
actually
real life.
worse.
And the thing is like this case really does feel almost like it would be a like horror thriller book that you're trying to figure out with all the different twists that happen in this. And I'm kind of surprised. Like, I actually hadn't heard of this case before. And I did watch the Netflix documentary, The Girl from the Picture, which I know, Shannon, you said you have watched.
Yeah, a long time ago though. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure some of the stuff will pop up and I'll remember a little,
Yeah,
but I don't remember I mean, a lot of the details. So this will be good to
right.
refresh. But yes, I do remember it.
So, like, also, disclaimer there's so much information to this case, and I'm
Yeah.
doing the best I can, but also know, like, I'm one person. And I realized as I was, like, typing up notes and, like, looking up more information after having watched the Netflix documentary that the Netflix documentary actually left some things out. And I don't know why. It's not like they were necessarily super important to the case, but I feel like
Yeah.
still were worth noting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm doing my best, but definitely don't take this as like the end all be all for the information of this because there may be some things that I don't have quite right or I maybe missed. There is a lot to this as well. So I kind of had to be like, what is needed and what isn't necessarily needed.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So this actually takes place in like several different states, but it all starts in Oklahoma City. So that's where this episode is going to be listed as. And I'm going to do my best to keep this concise. But again, there's so much to this case that it's kind of hard not to bounce around a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's fair. That's how a lot of them are, I think.
yeah. So on April 25th of 1990, Karen Parsley got a call from her friend Tonya's husband, Clarence Hughes, that Tonya had been involved in a hit and run accident and was in the ICU in Oklahoma City Hospital. He also told her that Tonya couldn't have any visitors and to stay put, but Karen didn't listen and she immediately drove there, which I think is great. She had become
Right.
friends with Tonya in 1989, and they were both working at the strip club called Passions in Tulsa. Karen already thought it was weird because Tonya never mentioned that they were going to be leaving or like going on a trip. And so Tonya was only 20 years old, and Karen just talks about how Clarence was significantly older than her. Uh,
That
and
name
they,
sounds old to me. Anyway, I think
right?
of like an older
Yes.
man.
Mm-hmm. And they had a 2-year-old son named Michael, who Tonya absolutely doted on. Like, she loved this little boy. Karen and some of the other women at the club had suspicions that Clarence was abusive, but he never left Michael alone with Tonya, and she would never leave her son.
Was it Clarence's baby or no?
We'll get to that.
Okay, sorry. I just didn't know. Okay. Okay.
As far as everyone
They
knows
were
right now,
raising him
yes.
together. And yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's his son.
Okay.
So when Karen arrived at the hospital, apparently the nurses told her that they did not believe she'd been hit by a car. Like, in the Netflix documentary, a doctor was even interviewed and he said her injuries just weren't consistent with having been hit by a car. They also discovered like old injuries and breaks that led them to believe that she had been abused. Unfortunately, Tonya did succumb to her injuries, but without any
Gosh.
proof, it seemed like they just went with it being a hit and run, which to me seems weird that if the doctors are like, this doesn't look
Right.
like a hit and run, and we also have injuries consistent with someone being abused, like, I don't understand
Right.
why we didn't. But again, we have to look at the fact that, like, it's Oklahoma, it's 1990, and she was an exotic dancer.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure they were just like, you know what?
Close the case. Yeah.
Yes. So Karen and some of the other women from the club decided to try and find Tanya's family to let them know what happened. And when they call her mother, the woman tells them, quote, "My daughter died 20 years ago at 18 months old." So it's at this point that Karen and the other women realize they don't know who Tonya is.
Yeah. Yikes.
So they bury her, which nothing I can ever see tells me, like, I don't know why Clarence didn't and how it fell to these women,
Right.
but they just talk about how these women got her a headstone and it simply said Tonya on the headstone. That was it.
Sad. I mean, I guess that's what she was known as to them anyway, and she went by that,
Right.
but
Yeah.
sad.
So after Tanya had passed, and before, I think this is before they discovered that they don't actually know who Tanya is, Karen did contact DHS because she didn't believe Michael was safe with Clarence. And they took him away and placed him with a foster family, and it was Merle and Ernest Bean. Now, I'm a little confused too because, like, I don't understand. Like, okay, we didn't like do any charges against him for abuse or potentially murdering her. I don't understand what they did or what was found to make them take Michael
Hmm.
away from Clarence. That seems,
It seems extreme to just take him without having solid, yeah,
yeah.
evidence of
So
something.
again, that was something that I was like, okay, that seems weird that you're like, yeah, he's not safe, but like,
Right.
we aren't concerned about his wife dying.
Yeah, that's all kind of odd.
Yeah. So I don't know. So Merle and her husband Ernest were interviewed in the documentary as well. And they talked about how when they got Michael, he had just turned 2 and he was still on a bottle, but
He was like little. I didn't realize he was that little. Okay.
he was only drinking Pepsi though. And if he was
Huh.
told no, he would have a massive tantrum. So Merle
Wow.
talks about how that first night, like he was with them, she took it away his bottle and gave him a glass of milk. Like she was like, we were just
I
gonna
don't
do
give a
this cold
shit.
turkey.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, and I guess he soon adjusted to life with them, and they talked about what a wonderful and smart boy he was. Like once he became settled and more adjusted, it sounds like they fostered quite a bit. Maybe
Hmm.
had some other children they had adopted and stuff. Clarence did still have visitation rights at this time, but anytime Michael was supposed to go with him, he'd hide and call him a bad man. So Clarence fought to regain custody, and they showed clips in the documentary of him saying the Beans were poisoning his son against him and that he was taken away with no proof and all of this. And like I said, I mean, I don't know on
Maybe.
that.
Yeah.
But so DHS, I guess, decides to do a paternity test, and they discover that Michael actually isn't Clarence's child.
Okay.
So his rights are taken away immediately, and Michael
Right.
no longer has to visit with him.
Good for that. Sounds
So
like.
this was like all ongoing for like 4 years. The Beans are in the process of adopting Michael, who's now 6 years old. And during all of this, again, no one really knows who Tanya was, but no one's really investigating now at this point either.
Hmm.
So then on September 12th of 1994, a report comes in of a man entering an elementary school in Choctaw, Oklahoma, Choctaw,
Okay.
and taking the principal by gunpoint, forcing him to grab a kid and taking off in the principal's truck.
Oh my gosh.
So this was Clarence, and he forced the principal to help him kidnap Michael, who's now 6 years old.
I figured that's where this was going. Okay.
Several hours later, the principal, James Davis, was found handcuffed to a tree with his mouth taped shut.
Alive, thank God,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Okay.
alive. He's alive. He said this man came in, held him at gunpoint, said, if you do exactly what I tell you, like, I'm not going to hurt you and stuff.
Well, good for that, I guess. But gosh, traumatizing.
Yeah. So the local sheriff quickly realized he was out of his depth and got the FBI involved, which thank goodness, because a
I
lot of
know.
times you see these things.
They think they can handle it, and yeah.
And he was like, nope, this isn't my thing. So the next day, Agent Joe Fitzpatrick showed up, and as they were looking into Clarence, they came across the life insurance policy he tried to use to collect on Tonya, and the Social Security attached to it was not for a Clarence Hughes, but a Franklin Floyd. And so they soon discover that he's had several other aliases.
Interesting.
And it gets worse from there. They discovered that in 1962, he had abducted and raped a 4-year-old girl from a bowling alley.
Oh gosh, sick.
So he was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in Georgia prison for that. But then in November of that year, he was transferred to a psychiatric facility. And in 1963, while being taken out for a medical treatment, he escaped and then robbed a bank of over $6,000. He was convicted of that. I don't know how much time he got. But by 1972, he was released to a halfway house and was on probation. And then in January of 1973, he was released completely. Like, he was just on probation. He didn't have to be at the halfway house. And 1 week later, he attacked a woman at a gas station and tried to sexually assault her.
Wow.
He was arrested, but for some reason he was given bail.
My
and
gosh.
he took off, and he was just on the run after that. So based on all of this information, behavioral scientists told Fitzpatrick they had 1 week to find Michael before Floyd would most likely kill him because he got annoyed and tired of taking care of him.
Yeah, well, and clearly he doesn't have any remorse for the way he treats human beings, so.
Yeah. Floyd here's not a good person.
No, he's kind of the worst, it sounds like.
Yes. So news goes out all over the country then. Is all over the country they're covering this case. And in the course of this, they do bring up Tonya and how she was killed 4 years prior in a hit and run. And this actually leads to a woman named Jenny. And I couldn't read my own terrible handwriting, and then I couldn't find her name, so I'm sorry I don't know her last name. It's in the documentary.
Yeah, that's fine. Jenny.
So Jenny, recognizing Tonya, however, she knew her as Sharon Marshall. And they had gone to high school together at Forest Park High School in Forest Park, Georgia.
Quite a ways from home there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Jenny said that they were the class of 1986. She described Tonya Sharon as very friendly, really smart. She was in all the gifted classes. She was friends with everyone, but her group of friends were more of the outcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And she really wanted to attend the Georgia Institute of Technology for aerospace engineering. And yeah. And so she was actually in high school. Some schools offer ROTC, which is if you aren't familiar, it's the air, I think it's just Air Force, right?
I think it's
for all military branches.
More than that. I thought it was military, but maybe I'm wrong. That's always what I assumed it was. But
it's something to do with branches of the military. And if you take this in high school, I think if you enlist, then you become an officer. You are fast tracked to being a ranked officer.
Yeah, it's something to kind of get you ahead of the game.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So she was in that. She was also part of the science club. And she had a lot going. Oh, she ended up getting a full ride scholarship to the Georgia Institute of Technology.
Get it, girl.
for this. And so, like, they interviewed a couple other classmates too that she was friends with, hung out with. And one of them, they were talking about how, like, her dad was so proud of her that he took out a full page ad in the back of the yearbook. Except this friend, Sherry, like I said, who was also interviewed, she shows the picture and it's like one of those, like, glamour shots, you know?
I do remember that.
Yeah. And
Like,
she
kind of
was like,
odd for the dad to
yes. And
post.
that's what
Yeah.
she said. She goes, it just seemed really weird because it's not weird for parents to take out the ads, but most of them put in like baby pictures and stuff. And they were like, for
Senior
her
picture
dad,
even? Like,
yeah, for her dad to choose one that was like kind of sexier felt weird. And she said that they all just thought that her dad was really weird and overly strict. So, like,
icky. Ew.
she didn't think a whole lot on it. And Jenny mentions how the very first time she or her parents actually met Sharon's dad, Warren, he had asked her dad for a loan. Like, straight up, he's like, hey, I'm Warren Marshall, Sharon's dad. Can I borrow some money?
Wow.
And her dad was like, you.
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you. No.
Yeah. And Sharon had also told Jenny that her mom had died when she was in second grade after she'd been hit by a car on a bridge. So,
Okay.
So she was expected to make dinner every night. She wasn't really allowed to get on phone calls. And Jenny said that if they were on the phone and her dad walked in, she would get like really quiet and rush to get off the phone.
I don't like anything about this.
So then one day, I think this is after they graduated, but like before college started, Sharon called Jenny crying because she was pregnant. So several months later, Sharon told Jenny that they were going to go to Arizona for a while for her to have the baby and give it up for adoption. She said her dad wouldn't let her keep the baby, and he was also no longer going to let her go to college. And when Jenny asked her why, especially because like this is her dream, she had a full ride, she would have like been able to do so much. Like she would have been an officer in the Air Force. Right. She would have had this like she would have like gone to work for NASA probably, you know.
And how can he control her from doing that? I mean, she's old enough, right? I mean, other than just the control factor of being controlling.
And unfortunately, I think as we'll go, we'll kind of see that because Sharon just told her someone needs to take care of Daddy.
Gosh. Yep. Clearly that brainwash. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to realize that as we go on. So Jenny,
very sad.
After she sees this information about Michael missing and this image of Tonya, who she knows as Sharon, she contacts Fitzpatrick. And as he's talking to her and showing her pictures, they make yet another disturbing discovery. And that's that Tonya/Sharon's husband, Clarence, Jenny actually knew him as Sharon's dad, Warren.
Was just gonna say, that's where this is going, isn't it? Sick.
Yes. She'd also mentioned how she'd heard from Sharon at one point that they were headed to Tampa, Florida. So they then discovered that in 1988, Sharon had started working as an exotic dancer at the club called Mons Venus. So they interviewed a woman, Heather, who had worked there with her. It sounds like maybe she was kind of like manager, lead of all these things. She said like this was the strip club to go to. It was high end. They had like expensive French lingerie. They had actors, athletes, all sorts of people with money who came in to this club, right? And she said she remembers Sharon just looking like an innocent little baby doll, and that, you know, like she wouldn't walk around the club in the nude like a lot of the other women. She'd still have like a lace cover up, all these things. She was just very innocent.
Yeah.
But then Sharon's dad tells Sharon that she needs to ask Heather about the parties she throws to tell Heather she's available to work them. So when I hear this, I'm like, well, what kind of parties are we throwing? Right. What are we talking about?
Yeah, that's a very vague term.
But yeah, so Heather said, the only thing that she talks about, she said she decides to have her do one of her millionaire parties. She said this is the easiest because the women just dance to 3 songs. There's no lap dances. The men can't touch them. And the girls will walk away with like $500 to $1,000. So Heather is then told that Sharon is standing outside the bathrooms and propositioning men, offering them sex for $50. And when Heather asks her about it, Sharon tells her that her dad told her to do it and even bought her condoms.
Gross. He sounds like a pimp, you know? Like,
right. And Heather's like, what kind of father tells his daughter, like, why is he telling her do these parties of mine? Why is he telling
That's
her to
sick.
offer
Yeah.
sex? Like, what the hell? So obviously, Heather and a lot of the girls there think it seems really weird. And Heather seems like she was trying to befriend her
Yeah.
and kind of take her under her wing. And then Sharon gets pregnant with Michael. So, and nothing is ever talked about who the father of these children are. Like her first child that she gave up, we don't know whose child that is.
Okay.
This one, I guess I found some it's never mentioned in the documentary. Later on it talks about, or not later on, in like some of the stuff I found online, they mentioned a couple men who it could have been. Like maybe she was kind of seeing someone at this time. I guess there's two men who it could have possibly been, but we
Well,
never
yeah, and
know
if
for
she's working at
sure.
a club and like you don't necessarily know what,
Well, and if she's
who and
propositioning men and,
yeah, exactly.
it's hard to
You it
say.
could be a lot of different people. Yeah, that's sad.
So she gets pregnant with Michael, and Heather talks about what an amazing mother she was, how much she loved her son. But she did know there's still something really weird with her relationship with her dad, because right away he never leaves Sharon alone with the baby.
Yeah, that's
So,
really
like,
weird.
immediately he's using that baby to control Sharon.
Hmm.
So soon there's another dancer, Cheryl, who starts hanging out with Warren and Sharon a lot. And there's then another woman named Michelle who's interviewed. And at the time, she was 15 years old. She lived in the same trailer park as Sharon and Warren, and she'd babysit Michael like all the time. She said she'd be there like 5 to 7 days a week, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And she mentioned how Sharon had, like, this was a two-bedroom trailer. She said Sharon had the bedroom in the back. The second bedroom was like a room for Michael, and Warren would sleep in the living room on a pull-out couch. And she said the pull-out couch was always out. So it was never put up as a couch. It was always left out as a bed, as a bed.
Hmm.
Remember this, that's going to come into play later. So Cheryl starts hanging out with them a lot, and Michelle talked about how she was really cool and super sweet. Like when she came into the trailer park, like she was driving like a super expensive car, but like she'd acknowledge Michelle, and that just made her feel so good because here's this beautiful woman
Right.
with this fast car, and
Yeah.
I guess Cheryl, like Heather was talking about how she wanted to get into modeling for Playboy and like that was her end goal and stuff. So Michelle talks about how one night they're all hanging out at Warren's trailer and they're watching like some sort of like fight, like I don't know, boxing or
Hmm.
wrestling, whatever. And so Warren puts a tape into the VCR to record it, but it starts playing what's on that tape first. And Michelle sees that it's a video that Warren had taken of Cheryl and Sharon on the beach, topless.
Gross.
And after a moment, Warren realizes what's playing and just
Oh
tells her
God.
not to talk about it. And she like quickly makes excuses to leave, right?
Okay. That's
I don't,
gross, but I thought it was gonna be something even worse. So like,
yeah, I did too when I
I
first
mean,
heard
it's still
like the tape.
terrible. Like,
It
gross,
is. Like,
bro.
why do
But
you have topless videos of your daughter?
yeah, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
You're
So
gross. Ew.
Yeah, so I don't know how it somehow gets around the club, and Heather finds out about this. So she asks Cheryl, like, why, what are you doing? Like, she's like, you need to stay away from Warren and Sharon. Like, I can't protect you if you're over there, right? And Cheryl just said that, like, Warren had told her that he'd send the tape into Playboy, I guess. I guess he took some photos too, and he said he was going to send them to
Thanks,
Playboy for
Dad.
her. Yeah. So Cheryl does tell Heather that Warren wanted to have sex with her, and when she refused him, he got violent. So again, Heather tries to warn her away from them. And one evening, as Heather is leaving the club, she sees Cheryl standing outside of Warren's truck and they're arguing, and she hears him tell Cheryl that he will kill her. So she goes and intervenes, and Warren actually like drives the truck towards Heather like he's gonna run her over. So she gets Cheryl to her car and assumes she's going home to her mom's, and that's the last time she sees Cheryl.
Wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, it's not long after that Warren and Sharon take off. Like they didn't say anything. Heather said they just up and left. Like Sharon didn't call in, give her notice or anything. They just take
Wow.
off. And so Warren told Michelle they had to leave town for a bit and asked her to keep an eye on the trailer and to check the mail. And about a week after they left, I guess another neighbor who's like across from their trailer is outside smoking when he sees a truck pull up to their trailer and a man go inside. Then about 5 minutes later, this guy leaves, and a few minutes after that, the trailer explodes.
Okay.
So this is in 1989 now.
Okay.
Okay, so this is happened in 1989. So it's at this point that obviously the FBI realizes that Sharon also had other aliases.
Huh?
And they also realized that the two went to New Orleans and got names off of tombstones. And so after doing that, Floyd, who was Warren, now becomes Clarence and made Sharon, now Tonya,
Anya.
marry him. Something else that I
Yeah.
don't understand why the documentary did not mention until like later on, so I'm going to say this here. In New Orleans, it turns out Sharon had been pregnant again and gives up another baby for adoption. So this is her third child.
Wow. But
So
she's only kept the one, right?
she's only
Yeah.
kept Michael, the second one.
Wow.
Yes. So
Weird. Why? I wonder. Like, why did he let her keep the one but not the others? Like, that's
right.
bizarre.
It is, and we'll find out. So this third one was a girl, and I'm wondering if the first one was a girl, and I'm wondering if
Oh,
because the second was a boy.
maybe that's a good point. Yeah.
I don't really know,
That's
but I
like
thought it was
sad though for her. I mean, I don't know.
right. But I thought it was so weird because it's not until like towards the end of the documentary where this third child is brought up, but I thought she was the first child at first, and then they talk about how no, it was the third, and while they were in New Orleans, they did. I'm like, maybe we should have said that
Right. I mean, I feel like that's
sooner.
important to this story considering every single thing is out of character here and
Yeah.
weird.
And
Like that could
instead of just being like, oh yeah, by the way, did we forget to mention in New
right.
Orleans she had also had a baby that she gave up for adoption.
Yeah. Wow.
So I'm telling you this now. Fitzpatrick also kind of puts together that Sharon was 20 when she died. So that means she was born in 1969. And if
Okay.
that's the case, there's no way Floyd is actually her father because he was in prison and at the halfway house from 1962 to 1973.
Hmm.
So they now realize that Floyd more than likely kidnapped Sharon and that Sharon was probably not her real name either.
Which makes more sense as to why he was so almost sexually interested in her, which is disgusting either way. But
Either way, it's terrible.
it makes you wonder. Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense than
Yes.
yuck, though. Gross.
Yeah. So, they don't even know where he could have possibly taken her from, right? At this point, it's been so long. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So, as kind of just a shot in the dark to try to find Floyd, the FBI sends out a notice to all law enforcement in all of the states they know where he's lived and worked in prior. So, this way, if he tries to renew any of his licenses with any of his aliases, they'd be alerted.
Kind of
Because,
impressed with them, like the steps they take, especially back in the day. Like this is pretty
yes,
like more than a lot of cases
in
get attention, I
1994,
think. Yeah.
yeah. And I will say, too, because they're pretty sure that, like, Warren wasn't, or like Warren, Floyd, Clarence, whatever, this creeper wasn't working. Like, he was pretty much making Sharon, Tonya dance to support him.
Yeah.
But they know, like, obviously, while she was younger, he had to have worked, right? When she was in high school, he had to
Yeah.
do some jobs and stuff like that. But yeah, so sure enough, in Louisville, Kentucky, he renews his license for Warren Marshall.
Okay.
So they have a local FBI agent dress up as a UPS delivery man, and they surround the house he's living in and arrest him.
Good.
There's one problem, though, and that's that Michael isn't with him.
Oh,
And
no.
they find a Greyhound bus ticket from Atlanta, Georgia to Kentucky, but there's just one. So they know that Michael didn't come with him from Kentucky to Georgia.
Shit.
And when they ask him where Michael is, he tells them that he left Michael with a rich family. And of course, they don't believe that. And like as much as they want to hope he's alive, they also realize that at this point, Michael is unlikely to be found alive.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how they try, Floyd won't give them any info on who Michael is or like where Michael is, and he won't tell them who Sharon really is. So the agents kind of realize that without any body or actual proof, convicting him of the murder of Michael is going to be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So they opt to charge him with kidnapping, carjacking, and using a firearm to commit these crimes. And in total, they can get him for about 30 years. And they're hoping that that would give them more time to build
For sure.
a case for Michael's death. Because, like I said, at this point, they just want him in jail so they can continue to
Yeah.
look for Michael so he
And they
can't
have enough
vanish
to hold
again.
him. Oh, yeah. I mean, that
Yes.
was a pretty big thing he did. So,
Yes.
like, at least they have that. Not like they can let
Yes.
him out.
So Floyd represents himself during this, and Fitzpatrick talks about how this was a way for Floyd to try and say his side without actually having to take the stand. And also, it kind of seems like he's a narcissist who'd like to hear himself talk.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So now Tonya, Sharon's friend Jenny from high school, actually comes to testify in the trial. And it's at this point in the documentary, or maybe like a little before that, that we learn the one and only time Jenny stayed the night at Sharon's house because her parents wouldn't let him. She talks about how her dad was out of town, so her mom let her, but said, you can't tell your dad. So dad clearly was like, this dude's not cool. I don't want you staying over
Yeah,
there.
there was a reason as to why he did not want.
Yes. So they were changing into their pajamas when Sharon showed her a drawer full of lingerie. And she said, quote, Daddy buys it for me. And then Floyd barged into the room because none of the rooms had actual doors. They just had curtains. And so Jenny's terrified because he comes in and they're just in their bra and underwear, but also he comes in with a gun, yelling at them, asking them what they're doing and all this. And so she's trying to cover herself up. And so then he walks out and Sharon just says, oh, Daddy's just being silly. Then a short time later, like they have their jammies on and stuff, Floyd comes in again, still with the gun, and he makes Jenny lay down and put a pillow over her face. And he then proceeds to rape Sharon with Jenny right there in the room.
Oh my gosh.
So Jenny said the two didn't talk that night, but the next morning, Sharon hugged her and said, that's just how Daddy is. I'm fine. You're fine.
And not only that, but like that for Jenny thinking that's her father too. I mean, it's disgusting
Exactly.
either way, but like, how about even more traumatizing thinking that someone's father, you're
Father
supposed to
did
be
that.
able to trust and yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
And Jenny never said anything because she was scared, which that poor girl, I mean, she's like, I don't know how old she was at that time. You know, she just said it was like,
Yes.
she could have been like 16 something, you know, and that's
Traumatizing.
And so now, like I said, even though it seems likely he killed Sharon, there's no evidence and there's no case open for it, but this is a way for Jenny to try and finally help. And so the judge finds him guilty and gives him 52 years in prison with no parole.
Good. That's better than nothing.
Yes. So then in 1995, the truck that Floyd had stolen from the principal is found, and they find under the truck, like it was like tucked up and taped up into a weird spot, like in the well or something weird. They find an envelope of over 90 pictures, and it sounds like there was a lot of graphic and like sexually explicit pictures, many of a young Sharon.
Oh, gross.
But there's also pictures of a woman who is bound and severely beaten, and so severely that the FBI agents don't think there's any way she could have survived the injuries. So Fitzpatrick talks about how she has, like, they could tell she's kind of really tan and all this stuff, so they decide to send her picture to several of the southern states Floyd had been in simply because of that. They were like, it's a shot in the dark, but maybe they'll recognize this woman. Maybe they'll have a missing persons case and they'll recognize this, right? So that's when Florida police realized that the Jane Doe they'd found a year prior was this woman. So this is 95. That means in 1994 they found this woman, right?
Okay. Long after Tonya, Sharon, whatever.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Well, so the thing is when these remains were found, and it was remains. It was a skeletal remain. It was only partial remains. So after comparing the clothing from the picture to what was found with the skeletal remains, coroner also compared the injuries in the picture to the damage on the skull, and they lined up. Michelle, who at the time had been 15, right? So, gosh, this would have been in 88, 89, she was 15. So she's in her 20s now, probably, right?
Okay.
She had to look at these pictures because there was a lot of visible furniture in it. And she said she immediately recognized Cheryl and the pull-out bed that Warren always slept on. So with this evidence, Floyd was then tried and convicted of Cheryl's murder.
Good.
And this was the reason for their abrupt departure, right? It was because he killed Cheryl. That's probably why he blew the place up. Like, there's probably evidence and stuff like that there. So now in 2001, there's a man named Matt Burbeck who is an author, and like a friend had sent him Tonya Hughes' profile on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children site. She's up there, so people are like, hey, maybe someone out there will know, you know.
Mm.
So he was hoping that he could get Floyd to talk and to tell him where Michael was and who Sharon or Tonya really was. Unfortunately, he didn't. Mac talks about Floyd's past, and it does sound like he had it rough. Like his mom left him in an orphanage when he was young after his father died, and he was abused both physically and sexually. But again, other people have that happen, and they don't end up doing the
Right.
horrific things that this
Like, I
man
feel for
did.
him. That's terrible. He had to go through that, but
Yeah,
also, like, break the cycle. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, case in point, look at Sharon Tanya.
Yeah.
Everyone talked about how happy she was, how kind and how smart she
Yeah.
was. And like the only reason why she didn't leave him was because it got to the point where she probably wanted to leave, but then he had Michael, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
And she
one
feared
article,
him, too. Yeah.
yeah, one article mentions how she was maybe getting ready to take off with this boyfriend who could have been Michael's actual father,
Mm-hmm.
and Floyd found out, and that's why he killed her. I
Yeah.
don't
I'm
know.
sure he did
You
not
know,
like that. Yeah.
no. I'm wondering if at this point, now that she's a mom and she's trying to protect her own child, if he realizes that she can no longer be controlled.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm not going to, like, if you watch the documentary, they talk more about his
Yeah.
past. I'm not going to go into that because fuck this guy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that
Seriously.
you had such a terrible childhood,
Yeah. Like, we get it, but
but
we
that
also
doesn't
don't.
make up, no.
Yeah. You still are a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So,
So Matt releases the book A Beautiful Child in 2004, despite still not knowing who Sharon is or where Michael is. So this, of course, leads to a lot of online sleuths trying to figure it out. And eventually, an email comes through asking if the DNA of a biological child would help. So, like, this is something, even now, I'm thinking this is child number one who was given up, right? So it's like,
yeah.
even as they're talking about this in the documentary, they still don't tell you until later that she was the third child.
Yeah. See, that has a lot to do with this part. So, why would they
Yes.
not? Yeah.
Yes. Because, yeah. So it turns out that, like I said, when they were in New Orleans, Sharon was pregnant for the third time, and they went to a lawyer and said they couldn't afford to keep another baby and asked help finding a family to adopt this one. So that's where Mary Dufresne
Mm-hmm.
said she talks about how she's the one who ended up adopting this young girl. She said she was unsure of the couple. He did all of the talking, but they went ahead with it. And one thing I hate, because at one point in the documentary, Mary really kind of victim blames Sharon, saying that after Megan was born, she was alone with Sharon and asked her if she wanted to see the baby. And Sharon told her no, she couldn't. And Mary said, if she would have just told me she needed help, I would have. Why didn't she? And like, I'm like,
Clearly, she
let's
doesn't
not.
understand the
Yeah,
cycle
I was like,
of
this
abuse. And
this
yeah,
girl's been abused for
her entire life,
her
most
entire
likely.
life, as far as we know.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot. And like, yeah, like, let's not.
Yeah.
You
And at
know.
that point, there's been a lot done mentally where
Hmm.
they're like so controlled that
Yeah.
they don't. And she's probably scared, like, now that she's lived with him for so long, like, what is she going to do without him? How is she going to live?
Right.
Like,
And that's unfortunately like a lot of abuse victims. Like, everyone's like, well, why didn't they just leave? But it's not that easy for so many reasons. But
right.
like the mental
You want to
component of it,
think
like,
that.
yeah. So, yeah. So I
That's
wasn't,
annoying. Yeah. Not
yeah.
a big
I'm
fan of
like,
Mary, but
yeah, I was like, that's gross, but okay.
okay,
So,
Mary.
yeah. So then, like, in 2011, I don't even know why exactly. I can't remember, but like, there are two FBI agents who decide to go try talking to Floyd again.
Uh huh.
This time, they actually get him to confess to killing Michael. He said he shot him twice in the back of the head at the Texas-Oklahoma border. He said he made it quick because he didn't want him to suffer. And it's like, then why did you even take him? Like, this is definitely a narcissist, a whole, like, if I can't have him, then no one else can.
Right. That's so sad. Like, he would have been better off just leaving him, yeah, with
Like, why didn't you just
anyone
leave? It's a
else.
whole control thing. It's a pride
Right.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
no.
Yep. Like, I'll show you. Yeah.
So they searched for 2 days, but unfortunately, they never found Michael's body. And this is also when he finally confesses to who Sharon really is. It turns out that Sharon's real name was Suzanne Savekis. And in 1974, in North Carolina, he met her mother, Sandy, who was upset that she had just lost her three girls. Now, this is something else that documentary never once brings up, it wasn't just her 3 girls. She'd also had a newborn son. He was born that year, and it sounds like maybe he was taken from her immediately
Mm-hmm.
because not once is that little boy mentioned. Um, and it's like I said, it wasn't until I looked online that I found it, but I think, like I said, that's because like later on, I guess one of his sisters talks about how they thought he died, and she found out later that he was adopted to another family. Yes. So it was Suzanne, and she was born in 69. Allison was born in 71. He was born in 72, and then Philip was born in 74, but Philip is just not around. Um,
Okay.
so Suzanne was only a half sibling to the 3 others. Sandy had her at the age of 19 with her high school sweetheart, Clifford. Like they had dated in high school, they were married right after high school, and then she became pregnant with Suzanne soon after.
Mm-hmm.
Clifford then went into the Vietnam War, and he came back for leave when Suzanne was 6 months old, so that was the first time he met her. But when he came back for good, Sandy said she wanted a divorce. She was already with another man, and that was who she had these 3 other kids with.
Okay.
So then in the documentary, she talks about how she had PTSD from a tornado hitting her trailer, which she probably did. But it also sounds like
Okay.
if she had just had a
Wicked. Nessa.
right. But it also sounds like she probably had some hardcore like postpartum
Yeah.
depression too.
Yeah.
So I don't
Totally.
know why, again, I don't know why they would have left that out. I feel like that's still pertinent.
Yeah.
So she went to social services trying to get help, she said, but then they took the kids. I'm also kind of wondering about, like, I don't know about Sandy so much because, like, when they're interviewing her, it seems like, okay, but then later on we kind of get that maybe, okay. Anyways, so Clifford then said that they contacted him to see if he wanted to adopt the 3 girls because they were all attached, so they wanted to find them all a home together. Which this also seems weird to me because Suzanne's his daughter, and if he still has parental rights, they have
Right.
no right to just adopt out his daughter, even if,
Right. He
like,
would get her before anything else. And then,
they're not a collection of toys. They're not like, oh, we want to keep the set together.
yeah, right. Right. I know. I was just going to say, why didn't she just go with him automatically? Like being the biological dad. And then if that's not a good fit, then they go to the next
Yeah,
steps. Like, I feel like that should be the order of it. Like, there's a
yeah.
process for a reason.
So I don't know fully how that was, but after thinking on it, because Clifford at this point, he's only 23 and he's still
That's
got some,
young, but yeah.
he's not in a good mental space after the war and he was
Yeah.
living with his parents. So he didn't think he could be a good father to 3 girls.
Yeah, maybe one. Maybe try out one. Like,
But like
dude.
to try to force
Yeah,
them, like,
that's messed
so
up.
this is when Floyd comes in. He was going by the name Brandon Williams and told Sandy that if they'd get married so she could get her kids back. So they do. And it's soon after that he becomes abusive. And in 1975, Sandy went to jail for 30 days for writing a bad check. She left her children with Floyd, and when she got out, he and the children were gone. So she went to police, but they told her that because they were married, it was a civil matter and she was on her own.
Even though they weren't his biological children.
I
That's
guess.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So soon after, I guess she found Allison and Amy at an orphanage, but she never found Philip or Suzanne. And I guess Allison, like I said, at one point, in the stuff that I looked at online, she first said that Sandy had told Allison and Amy that Philip had died. But then Allison found out from social services that he was alive and had been privately adopted out. And like actually in 2009, a man came forward thinking he could be Philip, and DNA proved that he was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay.
So Heather blamed Sandy for Suzanne's life, saying she didn't try hard enough. And at first I thought that was like really unfair. But then Mary talks about how she reached out to her to see if she wanted to get to know Megan. And she was just like, who's the 3rd child. So this
Right.
would have been
Her grand.
Sandy's granddaughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she just had no interest in that whatsoever. And
Sad too. That's just.
so then Allison having to find out from social services that her little brother actually wasn't dead. Like, I don't know, maybe Sandy wasn't the best of parents. Like,
Yeah. And the fact that she got them taken away to begin with was probably a
I
decent
don't think it
reason,
was maybe
right?
just because we were not great. Like we had postpartum. I think there was maybe more going on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, especially if it's an immediate thing. Like, what were we
Yes.
doing to, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So at the end of the documentary, it does show them giving Tonya a new headstone with her actual name on it. And Megan and Suzanne's friends and Father Clifford were there. So, like, Megan, her third child, was there, along with the women who had originally bought her this headstone, and her
Yes,
father
good.
Clifford were there, as well as Fitzpatrick, the FBI agent, and
Wow.
Matt. And so Megan actually now has a relationship with her grandfather, Clifford. And this part made me kind of tear up and cry a little bit in the documentary. She had a son and she named him Michael after her older brother who never got the chance to live his own life.
That does make me kind of want to cry too. That's,
right?
gosh, what a horrific, crazy story.
Yes. So, yeah, that is the story of that all started with a woman named Tonya being
And who would have
supposedly.
thought that I feel like none of this would have unraveled had he not taken Michael. I feel like that is really
He
what
would have gotten
spawned
away
this
with
whole
it.
thing. Yep.
If he had not done that, if he would have just disappeared,
People would have just thought, okay, it really was a hit and run, and
well,
he's
no one would
just,
have looked into it further.
no,
And who
no.
knows if maybe one day someone would have tried to find out more about maybe, but honestly, it's hard to say. It feels like if he hadn't taken Michael, he could have still been on the
And
run.
nobody would have
And
thought, and they would have just thought, yeah, he's with his dad, because everyone thought that was his dad. And I mean, it's really sad too, because it sounds like, I mean, given that she didn't have the best life, I mean, growing up, and I mean, even biological family, like out
yeah.
looking for her nonstop, that like nobody probably would have even noticed. And that's so sad, just because of all the name changes and stuff. Like, nobody would even know who she was.
Yeah.
And she had so much potential. That makes me so sad to think
It's
all the things she
so
could have done.
heartbreaking. It's
Yeah.
so heartbreaking. And it does make me wonder if she was trying, if she had finally realized that, she could maybe get away and he found out, unfortunately. Because that's the other issue with
Yeah.
people trying to leave an abusive relationship is the fact
Yeah.
that a lot of times this is what you have to be careful of. And it's heartbreaking. And it's so sad to know yeah, I mean, she was clearly probably had been sexually abused since she was 4 or 5 when he took her.
Yeah.
And for her to still not be withdrawn, to make friends, to do so well in school, to have had that potential to get a full ride scholarship into an aerospace engineering degree, like this poor woman was like fighting like
Right.
against it all. And it is so, I mean, all of these cases are obviously heartbreaking, but yeah, I was watching this documentary and I'm like halfway through and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, how do I still have like another 40 minutes left?
No.
What the fuck else is going to happen?
I know. I remember watching that. And like I said, I don't remember a lot of those like little details, but I was like, is this real life? Like, this is such a crazy, crazy story. And the fact that, like, I mean, obviously behind doors, we know her life was not normal, but like to have that normal, childhood, like teenage years, high school years to the public. And then when they leave and then all of a sudden you're throwing her into like prostitution and stuff. It's like, where does that, I mean, it's so interesting to me that like,
yeah,
he could have, I mean, used her. Well, he didn't want her to leave him, I guess, but like he could have used her for money, like if he was going that route, which he did, I guess. But like ultimately, had she gone to NASA or something, but
yeah,
it was just that control thing and like losing her. What am I going to do?
yeah.
And it's disgusting to think that.
But it is also a bit surprising that he did, because we know, unfortunately, in this state, like there are disgusting people out there who use small children in these ways, and for him to have not is very interesting. Like,
I agree.
I mean, I can't even, I don't get it.
I know.
I don't know. And because that was one of the things, is the FBI then thought that Michael was going to be his, like, to replace Suzanne for him. So I don't know.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, like, obviously we know he just wanted someone to control, but I'm like, if you're going to take someone that young too, you obviously are going to have to care for them and do all the things. And
well, but he obviously had done that already with Suzanne once before. But I guess if you're
that's
older,
what's
you're
weird,
like, I don't want to deal with this again.
That's fair. But like, even with her, yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, I don't know. It seems like there's a part of him that maybe wanted to be like paternal, but like like it's just sick. I don't know.
Yeah.
The whole thing is gross to me because of how, I don't know, like I mean, in the mom's judgment, Suzanne, not Susan, Sharon. No, wait, what was her final name? I'm so sorry. It changed a lot.
It did. It did. I know. So her actual name was Suzanne.
Okay,
She
that's right.
started with
It's like I said it
Tonya.
right.
Yes.
Tonya to
Yes.
Sharon. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
But like, yeah, I mean, her mom clearly had terrible judgment to leave her kids with him. And that's like where a lot of that started too, you know?
Yeah. And it does make me, I mean, it doesn't sound like Sandy had a bad life. Like she had a high school sweetheart, and then after
Yeah,
that, we just kind of, I don't know. And like I said, I have so many questions about
I know.
why Suzanne wasn't given to Clifford.
Right. And like, why did he decide to dump the other two girls, but just keep her, you know, like, were they old enough
Yeah.
that they knew what was going on
No, they were
more?
younger.
They were younger. Gosh,
Yeah,
that's right.
Suzanne was the
That's
oldest.
right.
So he probably, I'm wondering if at that time, if maybe they were still kind of in diapers and stuff, and if he didn't want to
Too
deal with
much work.
that, like
Yeah,
Suzanne was potty trained at least.
that's true.
Because
Yeah. And
she
it's
would have
easier to
been,
take care of one than it is
yeah,
three and to hide one and change one's
she would have been
identity.
like 5 or 6 at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Cause she was the oldest. Okay.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder if like, if she remembered her old life or if she had been, because at 5 or 6 and you have trauma, you might not remember that stuff. So like, did he tell her her mom died
Right.
by, which is so weird that he used the story of hit and run, because it then
I
makes me
know.
wonder, did he kill some other, like they don't ever say this, but I'm like, did he kill some other woman
Right.
and leave her on a bridge as if it was a hit and run?
I know. That's what, and it's like, why is that like his thing too? And like, that's always his
Yes.
go-to thing. Like, that's very odd. And it makes you wonder how many other people really fell into this web of all the things that we'll never
Yes.
really know.
Yeah.
Well, good
So,
police work there. I'm actually very impressed, or an FBI or whoever all was
yeah.
involved in that. That's actually really impressive, especially for it being that old of a case. I mean,
hmm
not old, I mean, not that old, but
Well, but
old enough to,
it was over what, 11 years, but it was, yeah, over 11 years before like Tonya. And again, the sad thing is Tanya's never really going to get full justice because he was never charged
yeah,
with that. They just left that as is, but at least now her name is known. Those in her life like can know about, and so
right.
hopefully that helped. But yeah, so my next case, I'm definitely, that one was a heavy one. And I'm like,
That's
yeah,
a
my
very
next
heavy
case is
one.
probably going to be a ghost one, because that one,
Yeah.
we're going to do something
Some of those
lighter.
are real, yeah,
'Cause this
crazy.
one was intense.
Well, I'm glad though that you did that one because I kind of had forgotten. Like I said, I've watched that, but it's been several years since I've watched it,
Well,
I think. So,
and it
or
was funny because
whenever it
like
came out.
when I came across it online and I went into Netflix to look, I had it saved. But
Yeah, that's right.
I feel like Netflix doesn't, I hate the way Netflix is set up now. I feel like you
I know.
can't
I
find like
know.
what you've saved
I
easily
know.
now, and it's a whole hot mess.
That's how I
So
feel with Hulu. And I'm like, I get really, really irritated, but it's fine.
yes.
Yes, it was there. So
Yes,
cool.
it was. So yeah, that's where we're at, you guys. Yeah, that was a heavy one. Again, if you want book recs, email,
Hit us
message,
up. Yep.
hit us up. Like all the genres. I like fantasy, I like romance, and I like all the spaces in between of romance as well.
I like a lot of things, but it
Horror.
depends.
I like some horror. So yeah, like if you want recs, you hit us up. You've got recs, hit us up. Like
Yeah, for sure.
you let us
Love it.
know. Like, rate, review, share, follow. All the things are posted in the show notes. We always appreciate that.
Yes, we
And
do.
until next time, stay Heartland kind.
But Darkland, wary.